Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Thunder. This is Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. And this is our productivity level up business, workplace, politics, leverage, you name it. Centered on, of course, the upward mobility of black men, um, but of people, in general. So we are happy to resume our regularly scheduled activities as Ike is now back stateside. He's back from Accra, Ghana, uh, globe trotter that he is. And my schedule, though still a great deal of stuff going on, has somewhat slowed. So, looking forward to getting back at it, getting ish done. Today's show, the real reason Americans aren't returning to work. The real reason. So, eager to get back to it. Getting ish done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. Let's go. Warning. Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. What's happening, man?
Word them up, 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 word them up. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I see you're back in your studio.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm back in this studio. Yeah, and it is the studio. I'm feeling good. Got my standing chair. I mean, my standing
S-
desk.
Yeah. Mm.
Maybe that's an idea. Maybe that's something. We need to have these standing chairs. It can give you kind of knee support or knee brace type stuff. Anyways,
uh,
uh, well, ready to go. Ready to get back on the regular programming, as you mentioned, also.
yeah, yeah. Regular scheduled programming resuming today. Back on the grind. Back on our ish. Back on our B ish. So, let's go ahead and head on over. All right. Let's see. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, that's of course only happening because I want it to work.
There's been a lot of talk and complaining about the laziness of the up and coming generation. Is it Gen Z? And of course, the millennials have been maligned for years about not having the work ethic that maybe the boomers or the Gen X or the greatest generation grew up with. And I used to think that too, and I got down on some of the younger people for that. But I've had a complete change of mind, and I think I understand why it is that there's such a labor crisis and why younger people and people maybe your age and my age are rethinking that mentality. You know, the thing with Americans, if you're a European watcher, I think many of us are really defined by our work ethic. If you want to skip or skate on anything, all you basically have to say to an American is, I was working or I had a job to do. That just covers everything. There's just this nobility that's attached with someone that just grinds and grinds and grinds. You know, the American spirit or the American dream or the building of that. Well, what has that produced and what has that caused? I got to looking about it, you know, and I kind of checked out of growing up in the trades and working construction.
So first thing, do you think that's true? Do you think you can just say you're working and people just leave you alone?
Maybe you got to be working while white and also in the
Uh,
right areas. But anyways, kidding aside, the work ethic and I was a hardworking man and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it does carry some weight. Maybe he sold it, or maybe he's hyperbole. Who knows? It's interesting what he said so far though about the what has the work produced. It was this final statement, but really, if you look progressively from generation to generation, you have on
mm,
one end the boomers whom could just quote unquote work in some company, put in the time, rise in the hierarchy, get a nice little parachute off, have all that stuff, pensions and all these other things that don't exist, and then a sliding scale coming down in terms of the economic output of work, the value of quote unquote work. Um, so the generations are complaining like, oh, these people are lazy. So it's like, okay, well, why would they put in as much work as you or do what you consider to be work or be loyal or whatever, uh, if it's not, the juice ain't worth the squeeze or the squeeze ain't worth the juice, whatever. Anyways, interesting so far. I don't know. What are your thoughts about what he's saying so far?
yeah, he's still kind of setting it up. That point about basically just being able to say that you're working, sort of covering a multitude of sins. Um, that's interesting. Uh, I've started to use a particular term.
Mm,
I call them bootstrap bros. So bootstrap bros are the ones that are unwilling to acknowledge the fact that you actually do require leverage and it's not actually possible to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. There have to be the necessary conditions, right? So you don't just pull yourself up from your own bootstraps in a vacuum, or in zero gravity, environment. No, the you have to have the necessary conditions in order to do so. Now, that's not to take anything away from hard work. Hard work is important. The willingness to do stuff that nobody else does. But one thing I think is interesting, and shout out to Green Gorilla, he pointed this out. Hard work does not necessarily guarantee success, and often it does not guarantee success. You have a lot of really hardworking, you know, they have a category of folks called the working poor. You have people that are quite hardworking, but ain't
Working
making
at
no
it.
bread. They
Working at
broke.
being poor.
That's
Sorry,
right. Working that brain. So there's another factor that's involved. And so aptitude is a part of this. Green Gorilla brought up something I thought was interesting in his sort of elucidation of this point. He brought up the fact that he himself didn't consider himself to be a hard worker, but he just basically was just smart enough to just be able to do the work, right? In his academic studies, until he said, until he got into grad school, which was a different thing. And so you do have to factor in other things. And so bootstrap bros are folks that are not willing to acknowledge any of these other factors and don't seem to have much nuance. So that's one of the things that sort of conjured up him talking about this sort of working hard and it sort of covering up for, X, Y, and Z. In some situations, that's true. It is the case that if you just say that you're working hard, that people will leave you alone. But I'm eager to hear the rest of what he has to say on this topic. Bootstrap
Okay.
bros, for the most part, exist on the right, which is an interesting
It's
dynamic.
interesting for sure. So I know that there's a leverage thing that's kind of behind, or on the other hand of the island of misunderstanding that bootstrap bros represent. So this
Yeah.
leverage thing is basic. So when it's just you and your bare hands and your brain, whatever, what you can ratchet up is your skill, right? You're like, oh, not I can't, I can put in the special BMW nuts, or no, I know about how to make but you're just ratcheting up skill, but still you're limited until you can maybe leverage other people's time slash labor
Yeah.
slash skill, right?
Yep.
And you're still limited in terms of, well, how many people that are, and then you get into either, leveraging capital is the next level, but cap, in between, or perhaps parallel to this, is the technology and distribution, like leveraging YouTube, for example, as we're doing right now. All these kinds of things in order that this value accrues to you through
Yeah.
hard work is not just going to bring the value out of the sky.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
not
you
going to
have to
bring.
have
It's
a
not going to
strategy.
cause these leveraging things to happen. This is a different thing altogether.
Yeah. You have to have a strategy. You have to have capability. You have to have aptitude. You have to have access to resources. There's a long list of things that are necessary. Now, having said that, there's no place on earth like America for the ability to actually, what is it, climb up the rungs, as it were, to cross, certain economic barriers that, class barriers, even, that in other places in the world, that's just not something that happens, not with any, but in America, there is a possibility to do that. But people just have to understand all of the mechanisms that are actually involved. And it's not just this simple equation that obviously this person worked harder, that's why they're doing better than you. No, not necessarily. And and perhaps often the case, is that they just did some smarter stuff. You did some harder stuff. So let's keep going.
My whole life, I did the same thing. Really, from the time I was 14, I started working for my dad's general contracting company, and then ultimately went out into doing my own excavating, and basically ran all facets of that. And what I saw with my dad is he worked so hard and tried to meet that standard, of a man going out and providing for his family, that in so doing, that he wrecked his body and destroyed himself. By the time that I was of age to be able to, really needing my dad and wanting to do things together, he wasn't physically able because he had so broke his body down for trying to provide, well, not trying, for providing for the family. I mean, you want to talk about work ethic. My dad was moving furniture, was a furniture mover when I was just a baby. And that was a full-time job, 6 days a week, lots of overtime. And in addition to that, he built for my mom and my sister and I a 5,000 square foot duplex home, a brand new, and he did everything himself. He dug the foundation, he did the concrete, this was before you could go, he didn't have the money to go buy pre-made windows. He cut all the windows, all the glass individual pieces, made the stiles, and the whole thing was all done. I mean, he did everything, and that was a massive, massive job. But what that led to was pushing yourself so hard, basically just used him all up. And
Now, what do you think of this?
If he had all that skill to build the whole house, I wonder why he was moving quote unquote furniture and for so long and so on and so forth. I was about to make the joke that he's leveraging the wrong thing. You should not be leveraging your back for lifting and whatnot. It's not good for your spine. But right? I mean, you gotta go with the knees. You can't be torquing your back. So that was one thing that came to mind, obviously, and it does kind of dovetail with this whole idea of, well, why would you? Obviously, there is money in some kind of operation. I don't know. You're moving furniture. At some point, you got to understand. Okay, well, how do I become the person that, I don't know, rents the van and rents the people, I don't know, from Home Depot, puts them, or have some 1099 contractors that then moves furniture, right? Rather than me using my back for years or whatever. And if he had those skills for the building the house, how come he didn't? Those are high paying skills. If you can do that whole thing, the carpentry, the cement work, blah blah blah, right? The roofing. So in here, still, I'm still seeing that people not making that connection between, you gotta like lever something up, like um what the baby boomers experienced perhaps was an anomaly, right? Let's just say that the idea that you could just be on this track, right? And yeah, there was great economic boom at that time that caused it such that they could just be on the track and get off nicely now, as they're mostly getting off into the sunset. But these days, no, you gotta be more cognizant of the leverage thing. Well, what are your thoughts about his dad and his building and his back?
Yeah, the whole, there's a lot. I think there's a certain kind of person that takes a certain kind of pride in just doing stuff themselves. I made this house with these hands. You know, the person that takes pride in doing their own work on their vehicles, not just as a money saving sort of strategy, because, at a certain period when you don't have any money, every penny matters. And so having certain skills can actually help you to survive. That's great. Stuff like me changing my brakes on my car, those kind of things that my dad taught me how to do. However, you get to a certain point and you have to figure out where that point is, where is this really worth me doing this? And I think that's difficult. It's a hard thing for a certain ilk a certain kind of man that has that um, an aspect of that traditional mindset that really took pride in doing the work yourself. In it's not. I'm not going to allow anybody else to do this. This is my family. I'm here to take care of my family. Um, there's that kind of thing, and there's a I have a I have a reverence for that disposition. Um, however, you have to sort of you got to figure out where the line is, and start making adjustments in the way that you think of that, because as he said, you're going to risk destroying yourself, because now you're doing a bunch of stuff that someone else can be doing. um, Part of it has to do with that whole working yourself out of a job sort of concept that we have discussed on this show, that I've discussed in particular. That's kind of my philosophy. I do things long enough to give it to someone else. And part of that, I suppose, maybe is because I'm bored easily, which could, by the way, be a sign that I have a lack of focus, right? Because those things tend to travel together. But you can hedge against a lack of focus by making sure that you actually um, follow through and address things uh, well. Okay, so I'm bored easily, but I'm actually getting really good at these things before I say, okay, you take it, let me do something else. So anyhow, that's the general thought.
It's interesting on what you just brought up, and it's a tangent, right? A tangent about focus, focused work versus a certain other type of kind of
Spastic.
bored, moving from point
Wild
to
and
point
crazy.
type. Yeah. So, and both of these people can be disciplined, but and perhaps even one individual, a person could have experienced both states of mind, right?
Hmm.
Right, more or less. But I think that each person has like a main strength, a gear that they have. Mine tends to be on a certain type of focused work where it's like a drive towards, like, I like to drill down and just get down to the deliverable on this particular vertical, right? Um, takes energy to move back and forth, up and down, and different stuff. But sometimes I have to do that, or sometimes I'm just in that state of mind that's doing that. And I had to recently kind of learn to regulate my energy differently when I'm in that crazy phase of moving from thing to thing. Because if I try to do it with the same focus, you know, it's a different kind of a burn. If I'm moving all around like that, I got to be light footed. I can't be.
Mm.
Swinging. So it was interesting. I've been kind of just doing a little experiment since I came back and whatnot. But interesting thoughts here about what our guy is talking about here, and you talking about the whole working thing, working yourself out of a job. Why didn't you do that? You're back, blah blah blah. And here's the thing: you talk about the doing your work for yourself and such. On the highest end of stuff like that, there's this kind of maybe asceticism monk type person out there
Yep.
living in the woods. Okay, we know what percentage of people that is. Okay, it's a small percentage of people. Adjacent to them are some artist types. Sometimes indistinguishable. Okay, they're into that weird. They're that guy. Okay, he lives in the woods and he makes everything himself and blah blah blah. Cool dude. Okay. And then you have the cultural, the people for whom it is some more like, I'm the man who does blah blah blah. And to the degree to which you have a family and certain other things like that, it'll be dereliction of duty for you to f up your kids' prospects and their education or whatever, or your ability to take care of your family because you wanted to do it with these two hands or whatever BS.
Right. Yeah. That thing that he was talking about, how he got to a certain age and he wanted his, dad to be playing with him and hanging out with him and stuff, and he can't do it because his
Mhm.
body's all jacked up.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's real talk, and that's real talk. Not just so okay. So the way that this
Mhm.
guy did that, the way that this guy's dad did that,
Mhm.
there still seems to be like a sense of honor. But
Mhm.
if he did that by eating too many Krispy Kremes,
Mhm.
right? He ate himself to death or he drank himself to death. That would be an issue, right? But
Mhm.
he worked himself to death. It's like this. That's like there's like honor, right? It's like, hey, he's this kind of guy. But you have to start looking at that and saying, well, but the net effect is like the same thing. It was
Yeah, and now you're not here for your family. And you're dead. It was due to your negligence and all that kind of stuff. Like now you can't be slipping like that. No.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
He wasn't able to be really there and to be involved in a lot of the things that he would have liked to with me and with my son Jack. I watched a video, a short the other day, of a guy that was a welder, and he really touched upon this. And this guy is probably in his maybe 30s or so, late 20s, late 30s, a real talented welder. And he said his company is begging for welders, begging for journeymen, anyone that's a trade, offering good pay, offering $27, $28 an hour, as well as time and a half and double time for overtime. He said if you wanted to, you could essentially work as long as you wanted to because there is such a demand. And he said, but I'm not doing it because this is why I'm not doing it. He said, I was happy to have that money and to put those hours in until I realized that my employer was charging $200 an hour for my welding from whoever it was that they were working for and only paying him 27. Not giving people a living wage.
Okay, I want to park here for a minute.
I don't know, man.
So,
20 something an hour is a living wage.
right.
Anyways, go ahead.
So this is now. So it sounds a little. Maybe it has some. What is it has like some commie overtones or something to what he said, right?
Yeah, but
Mhm.
yeah. Until he fully goes there, the benefit of the doubt is always to give people that they're not as perhaps incisive or at first maybe even in describing themselves than that they're some kind of a bloody commie, guilty of the sin of envy. But basically, if I may say this real quick, is the immediate next jump when you see what your boss is getting paid is to immediately ask, well, how you do that as well. Because the point is, you accepted $27 an hour because there was nobody else throwing out at you 50 or 80, right?
Right.
So when you don't just see free money around, there is something, there's a barrier, a hoop you got to jump through, okay? Jump through that hoop as well and become your boss. That's always it's obvious, right? The boss is not some weird class of, evil person. How is
Mm.
he able to do that? You do it. Anyways, go ahead.
So part of the reason I wanted to park it here is right now in the space, and it's been for a couple weeks now. Uh, Pearl Davis, just Pearly Things, has been sort of there's been a lot of life. So she interviewed uh, Fuentes, Nick Fuentes, and probably ill advised. She was not really knowledgeable enough to have someone like that on her platform. People felt that it was insensitive since a lot of the people that work for her are black people. She referred to Africans as her Africans, and she made some other comments and some other things that sort of sent the pro-blacks, in a tizzy. Okay. Now, here's the thing. I don't think that Pearl is blatantly racist or anything like that. Any more racist than anyone else. However, I do think that in the aftermath of this interview, certain things were exposed with respect to her business practices. What she's paying certain people, what she's not paying, who's getting the credit for doing the work, who's actually doing the work, a lot of these kind of things. And I did a stream where I was discussing that there are colonizing agents on the left and the right, but they just operate differently. Right? So the reason I wanted to stop here, is in this circumstance with Pearl, and with anyone that has whatever money that they have, and they make an agreement with whoever they make the agreement with to do whatever job for whatever rate, and there is a power dynamic, do you find that inherently problematic? Do you think that there's an issue there? Or do you just think that
you just described employment of all kinds,
right.
money exchanging hands for service with the power dynamic involved,
right.
whether perceived or real, this power dynamic. But the whole point is there's a market that offers. That's why I was market of other people, right? What you accept once you the thing is there's freedom to accept, and just like he accepted the $28, the Pearly person also accepted that deal. And one of the reasons why companies don't like going public, and that's why one of the things that Facebook kind of resisted going public for a while was a control thing, and then B, this kind of exposure of the plumbing. If you open anybody's quote unquote practices and you decide to put a spin on it that you want, oh, he hires people from, I'll be the guy, that runs an African slave sweatshop, right? With and whatever, right? So the whole thing of bringing out your negotiations into public as though it was done under duress, I mean, it's like all that stuff is, to me, is just like just human beings, now being messy. It's like you've signed all kinds of things and all kinds of employment contracts if you go all the way back from the beginning to this point. And there are many reasons that you may or may not have signed certain things that you may regret, and you may think you may have found out about what the employer was, how much they were making, who they were paying this other person. But to come out and make that a thing, I find an issue. It's like, dude, you don't know how the world works. Like, where things are supposed to be kind of, there's this fair mechanism that controls. It's like, dude, it's a marketplace.
Now, Pearl came out and she apologized for the whole thing. Of course, she also did a stream, a live stream on Instagram. I think she jumped on with the lead attorney, where she implied that the apology was a phony apology, and so then people are having an issue with that too, right? Donovan Sharp advised her not to apologize.
Do you think people are not red pill enough?
Something.
In the most real sense of the word, because you see these people, this quote unquote red pill people, don't understand how the world works. I don't know why they're surprised by anything. It's like they're surprised by basic stuff, like, oh, you mean Santa Claus is not real? Oh my God, let's have a protest. What are you talking about? Hyper blue pill. Anyways,
yeah. But anyhow, so Donovan tells her, don't apologize. She apologizes. It blows up even further in her face. and
Always does.
this kind of thing. It always that sort of thing always happens. Now, I think she did take some missteps, and she's 26. She's going to take some missteps. Uh, I think that a bunch of other stuff is sort of exploding around her, and they're trying to use all this stuff to make these weird connections that don't make any sense. I do think that she made some racially insensitive statements. I do think that she should have stood up when this dude is making certain statements, given that the people that have been supporting her platform and the people that work behind the scenes disproportionately are black. So that had a certain ring to it. But one thing that she did, and I always look at folks with a side eye when they do this, folks that are on the right, conservatives, white folks in particular, when they start to quote Thomas Sowell, because there's a lack of nuance. They don't really understand Thomas Sowell. But if they cite Thomas Sowell, see, look, here's a black guy, and he thinks that you can be a bootstrap bro. So what's the problem? Right? This kind of thing. Ignoring all of the nuance, ignoring all of the other things, ignoring the fact that Thomas Sowell actually agrees with the issue. He agrees that, there's systemic issues. He agrees that, slavery got this thing started. He agrees that there's all kinds of issues embedded in all that. He agrees with all of that. He agrees with all that. His solution for the problem is different. But what they do is they jump to what they think his solution is, and then they point and say, see, black people, see, the issue really is that you're just lazy. You're just not working hard enough. And that really isn't the issue. You have plenty of black people that are willing to work hard. They just don't have these other mechanisms, these other leverage points, and all this other stuff that we're talking about. So they're, it's spinning around in a circle as opposed to actually heading in a particular direction. I mean, I've said this several times. Black folks tend to be law-abiding and tend to actually be hardworking. You have a small percentage of us that make a bad name for us. You have a disproportionate amount of crime that happens and murders that take place, mostly gang involved kind of things. You have that stuff that takes place. However, black folks actually tend to be pretty good rule followers, but that actually may be to our detriment. So you're following the rules. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Hey, I'm punching the clock. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not getting anywhere with this.
That might be the actual, a salient aspect of the levers and circumstances that you said are missing from the black people, as you say, that are willing to work. Willing to work, but certain things are missing. And one of these things that you've described as a presence, a positive presence, which is the law abidingness, is in a certain way related to this looking at things from outside and saying, hey, look, it's about leverage. Look, the circumstances are, the game is not real. I need to always go behind the curtain to find what's really going on. Otherwise, it's not gonna work out. But it's kind of like a slow train wreck. This whole story of because now people don't. Now it's about hustle and gig economy, and everyone is a studio entrepreneur, and because I guess
right.
you already kind of know. I mean, you can see the signs in the culture, right? That it's not about obviously the job anymore, because the job has disappointed quite a bit, and especially also this is kind of related to a general economic trend with regards to employment. It is hard to find the welders and so on and so forth that he was talking about, his friend being an example of, right? Uh, Skilled labor in many places amongst people whom are not college educated. The market is hot in those areas. Hard to find and retain people. And if what he's saying about his friend, which I'm eager to hear the next step his friend took, is true, that they're realizing, oh, $200 an hour. What do I have to do? Well, what you have to do is you have to put yourself in a situation where you can demand $200 an hour from the whomever the general contractor, the owner is.
And I think people
What
were
does that
willing to
take? Then you
tolerate
just
that to
follow.
a certain extent
Yeah.
because, you
Sorry
could
about that.
kind of get ahead and you could get up on top of it.
Sorry
Did
about
you
that. Keep
skip as
going.
well?
Yeah,
Oh
I
no.
was
Okay.
I was trying to do something on the other screen and it thought I was doing something else. Keep going. I'm sorry.
All right. So part of his friend's story has to get to the part where he sees, hey, I have to become my boss. There are many, many, or at least a mini version of him, or I have to become maybe a decentralized broker here in terms of my welding services. I have to become a person that becomes a 1099 rather than a W-2. I have to go independent, and then I can make something of my, I have to put a name, put my mark on there. It is WJ Welding, okay? Or my name is Mike Swelding. My company's name is Mike Swelding. That was something I heard somewhere. It's kind of funny. I'm Mike Swelding with Mike's Welding. I was like, this guy. Anyways, so put your name out there. Becomes that is the. So if this is a great revelation, well, I guess more people need the red pill, as I alluded to earlier. But this is a definite other red pill that people on this side of town, I guess, on this side of the tracks,
Mm,
aren't taking yet.
yeah. All right. Let's keep going. Let's go back just a second.
We're willing to tolerate that to a certain extent because, you could kind of get ahead and you could get up on top of it. And if you wanted to put some work in, you could get into a house and hold sweat equity and all that. But now you can't do that anymore. So even though these wages may look kind of enticing, we're looking at $27, $30 an hour, they really aren't, because it doesn't make any difference whether you're making $30 an hour or 40 or 50. It's still going to be almost impossible, unless you have a dual income or a dual income family, to get into a home or really start that American dream. So what the point? What is the point?
Yeah, and this is interesting because what has happened is what you could do with one income, and then your wife stays home, she takes care of the kids. You could have a vacation, you have a car, you've got the house you want, white picket fence, all of that kind of stuff. Now it takes two people's income to do that, right? And then the property value, houses cost so much more than they did before. This is part of the sort of energy behind that quote unquote living wage sort of terminology that people use. I think that term has a lot of baggage, and I would prefer a different term that is more nuanced about addressing the real issues. But there is something about that, this American dream, this just work hard and you'll make it. But the way that it's a different game now, and you have to acknowledge that it's a different game. Go ahead.
It's kind of crazy that you mentioned the living wage, and which is a manifestation of this kind of a thing, like it's a froth on top of the wave, but the ocean going on below. In other words, women are working, big secret, as much as they're working and the way they've been working, including why they started working to begin with. It's because of the economy, right? And I don't just mean, in other words, there's certain basic trends that underlie people's incentives, right? That tends to happen first and silently, because it's typically a slower story. And then later, the styles and many other things manifest, and then there's a feedback loop as well of accepting the new economic reality and making some kind of a statement out of it and philosophizing about it and whatnot. But this slow moving train wreck of understanding that the American dream doesn't work anymore is a simple, it's a financial story. It can be understood, or interpreted, I should say, right? It can be interpreted. It's like, there's this wave pattern that people see. We can all look at it. We see it happening, right? And then there's several stories that can be overlaid to interpret it. So everything short of that looking at that thing and what's causing it, and is a mistake. Now, obviously, you don't have to go that, but the point being, you have to look behind the curtain, right?
Yep.
The the fact that we have to grow and that we base a lot of things on growth when we could not deliver the growth is basically what we're dealing with here, right? Such that the debt starts getting bigger and bigger, right? That's just it's that simple. If you were a single household, you would know. You won't be surprised. So like, I thought we thought we could have this many more kids and this many more this and that, and just keep going, print more, yeah, borrow more, but it's not really actually happening. So there are many stories that we're great, but really it's all on zeros and ones, screens and stuff like that. Technology is now synonymous with computers, tech, right? How about the actual growth, the actual stuff where the people who actually works? Like, no, those jobs are gone, blah blah blah. So these things are definitely real. And I guess ham and eggers are not just gonna immediately not gonna be the first to kind of grasp onto what's going on, I guess. So
They'll be the last. Actually, they still won't know. They'll still be they'll still be working on the assembly line, and still not be aware. Um, I was BGS Idmore put a video out, and he was basically just read an article. He was talking about an article he saw where, and we're probably going to cover this tomorrow night. This will be one of the topics when Two Dads React. But McDonald's has basically, they've given a bunch of their employees at the corporate offices time off. And basically, what they're doing is they're deciding who they're going to invite back. They're going to do massive layoffs. And we're talking about middle management kind of positions, 50,000 corporate positions, 50K and up positions. And a lot of these positions likely will be replaced by AI.
that's one. It's quite interesting because what Elon Musk did recently, and why it's kind of crazy, unprecedented, or why it got a lot of what he did with Twitter, basically, when he came in and just chopped off as many as he chopped off. I forgot the percentage, but it was kind of ridiculous, like over 50% or something like that. People, because there's a whole kind of, how do I lay people off? Should I let them go? After all, I was the one that kind of let them in when money was flowing and I wanted to look like or whatever, and now blah blah blah. A lot of CEOs, because Mark Zuckerberg, who was holding back before, is now, he's getting in there. He's chopping, and he seems to enjoy. He's enjoying the chopping. Right? He's like, oh crap! Look at all this dead weight, right? So, um, Elon Musk, in his typical brash, I own everything, I'm going to buy everything and just do what I want style, has just shown that for even before AI, is a massive bloat in that managerial
Yep.
place where, after all, most of these college educated people went to go stash themselves. Um, and just the same thing that's happening to this guy, you know, is the equivalent, I guess, of the managerial class too. Anyways,
All right, let's keep going. That's a good point. This sort of copycat sort of nature of uh, the business world, as it were. Well, the CEO, hey, he just chopped a bunch. Hey, we can do that too, kind of a thing. That definitely seems like that factors into it. Let's keep going.
I can make a little bit of extra money, but at what cost? At the cost of destroying my body, giving my blood and my vitality and my future vitality to a corporation that is so greedy, or a construction company that's so greedy that they are not willing to kick down a little bit of extra money to pay for the expenses and the additional expenses that life has brought upon us. I started to think about this.
So, maybe he's not full on commie, but he definitely has some of those, you know,
He bought into the
He-
story. He was told that if he does this and does this and does this, people will love me and care for me, right? The Mr. Big Man on the hill with his car, he wants me to.
yeah. So there is that. Um, but okay. So this is interesting because see, in one sense, I am a um the government doesn't have any business getting involved in anything, any private arrangement that I make between me and somebody that's going to do some work for me. They weren't going to have work anyway. They weren't going to be doing anything. So I don't, you know, I don't really, I'm not for them telling me how much I have to pay them, you know, because if I can find somebody that's willing to do the work, if this benefits them and it benefits me, at least at that point in time, then, you know, then what's the deal? What's the problem? So in one sense, I'm definitely that. On the other sense, and you see this in academia like a mug, you want to talk about uh, bloated administration, you know, high, heavy salaries at the top, when the folks that are actually creating the intellectual property, that are actually delivering the product, the ones that the students actually come to the schools to actually study with, the ones that are recruiting the students, the ones that if those professors were not there, the students would go somewhere else and spend their money somewhere else, right? Um, there is just doesn't it doesn't seem to be. I know. So this also has a lot of baggage. It's not equitable. There's a
Look, I'll
lot of
give you
baggage there.
a lot of ammunition for the academia thing because if you look at any industry and you look back 100 years, okay, and it's still the same. There's no other than certain religions whereby there's still the same person that's on top, the same institutions. Let's say Harvard or Yale or whatever. You know, corporations don't last that long on top, right? Banks go down. While you remember Washington Mutual, or whatever. Like, if you look at the Fortune 500 in terms of the churn, because the thing about mobility is it goes up, but it also goes down too, right? Your chances of falling down are also quite high in America too, right? Same thing with the corporation. So if you look at any particular area of the world and you see something that happens in education, which is Harvard is still on top, that means it is rotten to the core. In other words, the system and rotten to the core is a value judgment from the point of view of
Mm.
competition and markets, right? It's saying, hey, look, there is no way that this is the most efficient arrangement for 100 years. So no one else figured a better way to do this.
Yep.
That's got to be just corruption ingrained. It's not going to change that kind of stuff until it is interesting because following the analogy of okay, you just see what your bosses are doing and try to recreate it. Someone like Barry Weiss, for example, she's the one that joined forces with other people to create University of Austin or that place with the intellectual dark web and places like I think Glenn Lowry is actually getting invited there, and which would be interesting to see if he actually does lectures. But anyways, but those are tiny like drop in the buckets, like these name brands like Harvard and whatnot, and the entrenched interests that they represent is not some kind of open market, open for disruption. So I'm giving you full uh, ammunition there in terms of saying, look, it is indeed inequitable the way that thing runs. And also, given the inflation that education has had since the
Oh
60s,
goodness.
with also the downward return that you get. It's like as the return has been coming down, obviously you have college education and you work as a barista. That has been happening while the value of or the cost has been going up. So it is complete ridiculousness going on over
Yeah, we're generating a lot of really knowledgeable strippers. She could talk to you on a variety of
Yeah,
topics.
topics. You want geopolitics, a little dash of
Oh,
culture. Oh, she's into Mediterranean cuisine too.
oh, oh, this is messed up, bro. It's done. Oh, okay. Oh my goodness gracious. Uh, so, uh, all right. So let's keep going. Man.
And after hearing him talk and hearing that from a younger generation, it really dawned on me. And I had kind of done the same thing as well. When I got out of construction was basically about the time when I started getting into YouTube. I was at the point where and still do suffer all sorts of health problems because of just overwork, overexertion, knee problems, back problems, neck problems. Being out in the sun, being out in the elements, all that just takes a massive, massive toll on you. And I realized looking at my dad and looking at his dad and guys that were the Gen Xers and the boomers that were in these trades, almost all of them were crippled and had to do basically something where they could sit down and not have to use their body, or because they weren't able to use their body.
Yay to the robots.
Yeah, something. Okay, so something that's interesting about this, I was just considering. See, we don't feel bad about athletes that can't hardly walk, and the reason that we don't is because they got paid, right? See, that's why we don't feel bad about basketball players, for instance, or football players that played for a long time in the league, and what they're paid for it is they've got aches in their knees, or they've got a tricky lower back, or whatever it is. And the reason that we don't is because we believe that it was worth, the money that they got was worth the injury that they sustained. So the issue here is not a matter of working hard. It's the issue in perhaps sacrificing your body and your health. The issue is, what are you getting in return? That's the issue. Well, I mean, do you agree with that?
I 100% agree with it. And there's two levels of judgment being also exercised in terms of agency to the person being judged. We give more agency to the athlete, and we just expecting these other people to be taken advantage of. Well, we choose to we label whom we want to treat as a baby, depending on whatever moral or legalistic judgments we're trying to have. Who's quote unquote more responsible. These people, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know that kind of a thing. But this athlete, oh no, he knew what he was doing. So I also see that kind of mismatch happening there as well. But 100%, it is about what the trade is, and it is correct though. So I haven't said some people are looked at as sheep. It is correct to look at people there as inputs into an equation, statistical equation, where you generally know what the expected value would be, what the average person would do. So if there's a negotiation thing that's going on in terms of trade and markets and leveraging, these things are not, these are higher order things. If people do exist that are, let's say, 80 IQ and can't do anything even in the military, right? And then there's a whole, it's a good number spectrum from there to like 105 or 110, where people can't even begin to play a little bit of two-dimensional chess in terms of leveraging some future skills, some this, that, the other, planning in that order. It is kind of fair to treat the masses as, hey, they're not going to make the right kind of bets they're gonna beat up their body for this paycheck, and it's not gonna be worth it. But we cannot blame the person who was given the paycheck, though. That's why we can't be like, oh, the evil capitalist. Like, what the hell? He was out there transacting with other people. Maybe you should. Maybe you be like, oh, the people should be better educated, understand their options more, or whatever. But no, I'm just out here in the. I just wanted to add that point.
Yeah. Uh, don't hate the player, hate the game. Let's keep going.
Exactly.
And when I started realizing that, I thought, that's not what I want. If you live to 80, 90, that's a long time. And sometimes we think that you forget how your quality of life, how you can, if you were to maintain that, if you were to take care of yourself a little bit better, those remaining 20, 30 years could be completely different, a completely different experience where you might be able to play with your grandkids or your great grandkids and get on a bike and go do things because you didn't just give yourself over and your body over to be
You pause
a
here for a
wage
second. Yeah,
slave.
this is obviously a very big deal, right? I mean, this particular show is all about getting this done. There's a lot of it that has to do with energy. Our first show was about sloth, which perhaps at least is partially energy related. Energy regulation, efficiency, right? So that you're getting most bang from your buck and all that. And what he's talking about now about your future in terms of the longevity of your body, how robust it will be. Beyond the work, which there's a lot of blaming going on here. Oh, it was my job. It's like, dude, no. It was your diet. It was the fact that you didn't understand that you have to stay limber and stretch. Just like some obvious things, right? Like if you ever do yoga, if you ever done like any body meditation, or if you pay close attention to how your body actually, how to use a statement, you actually are a body. If you ever pay attention to the fact that you're a body, you will notice that being having range of motion in the shoulders here, that there's this fascia of muscle, whatever, it's just, it's not, that covers your skeletal structure, right? That's what gets massaged and all that kind of stuff. Like, what are those things on the surface of the it turns out that a lot of these diseases that you get later on in life, it's not because of the bone or the joint in the bone. That's not where it really started. It was because of the fascia and all these kind of micro tendons and whatnot that are responsible for your range of motion and your stretching and all that kind of stuff. Because if that stuff is, I mean, just think about it physically, right? If you got this crazy little thing around you that you're not keeping limber and all that kind of stuff, you're gonna just crack in there and anyways, a lot of these things have to do with your habit, your exercise, your hydration, and so on, which, to be honest, these past generations didn't have the best of habits with regards to, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. There's definitely things that we can do um, to improve our quality of life. Just diet, exercise, the stuff that we know you're supposed to do: stretching, meditation, um, uh, mindfulness, hesychasm. You know, I mean, there's lots of things to do. I mean, it's Lent right now, right? Lent in the West and in the East. The East is 1 week behind the West, so this is Holy Week right now in the
It's
West.
also Ramadan, by the way, too, right?
Oh, right. So, and then in the East, when I say the East, I'm talking about the Orthodox Church. Holy Week is next week. Um, but during now in the West, a lot of this sort of fasting regulations have been softened quite a bit. In the East, it's still ideally it is a vegan fast. Okay, um, and with a few days where you're allowed to eat fish or you're allowed to eat eggs or something like this. But it's really like a vegan fast for the whole thing. Now I have a an arrangement with my priest. I had some conversations saying, look, I need more protein than this, and we talked through what it was that I could do. So I still eat eggs and I'm still having dairy, but I'm not been eating meat. I'll have fish every once in a while, but I'm not eating meat. and I cut out all of the stuff that I really want, which is like the ice
Mhm.
cream and the, you
Mhm.
know, and the donuts and the you you know, the cake and the pie and all that. That's the stuff I really want. So all that stuff got cut out. But the thing is that I'm saying this to say that um, putting yourself on some sort of regular dietary restriction, that's a cycling restriction, is actually very healthy for you in your longevity. But we don't tend to do that. And it's possible to, because you're working so hard, because you have no time to even think, that you just get into certain habits that are just not good for your health. And if you actually had those things together, you would actually feel better in your working, probably could work longer and harder and still have less consequences for it in the long run. Um, so that's one thing, and I think that's totally true. But the other thing I wanted to say is, or to ask, is where's the line? So, um, a consequence of, uh, you know, Adam's simpery, um, a consequence of that is this curse, and this curse has to do with women in childbearing, pain in childbearing. That's part of it. For the men in particular, it is sweat from the brow. It's working the land. It's the physical exhaustion, the constant laboring for a lifetime. That is the consequence. It's one of the consequences. It's one of the curses of the fall, right? So where is the line? So where's the line between, look, this is a consequence. This is what you have to do. If you don't work, you don't eat. This is reality. And then these sort of, what can sort of come off as being first world problems, talking even about, you know, you being able to play with your grandson and stuff like this. Other places, they don't live long enough to have a grandson because they actually work themselves to death far earlier. So you understand the frame?
Oh yeah. Uh, I'll let me start from this very narrow point here about the family structure, talking about the grandchildren and whatnot, because part of what's also going on here is a weird mixture where you're trying to get everything you want. You want this individualistic, somewhat self-centered, solipsistic society where you guys are not living together in multi-generational households as is done in other places in order to kind of work through a lot of these economic things. It's one house taking care of this person versus that person, this person chipping in, all the phases of life being represented in a certain flow. You don't want to do that, but still you want certain outcomes and whatnot. And also with regards to the work thing, okay? The truth is, it is difficult, right? And it will always be difficult, whether, and one of a part of the demarcation there is when you realize and you're with the difficulty aspect, you either just, hey, I'm going to accept and just grind myself to death, or I'm going to take the other difficult path, which is to, see what's behind the curtain, become the boss, whatever, leverage, all it's all hard, right? No matter what.
Mhm.
Or there's the middle path, which is probably the easiest path, which is to become a victim, right? Which is to just, you know, say, oh, now just completely wallow in that. Because, you know, both other paths do involve you taking having some agency, pushing back a little, making it perhaps a little easier on yourself, not being in your own way, for example, right? And not making it any worse. At least that's what you can do on those other paths. But path of least resistance is definitely just say, yeah, hey, I did what I was told. And part of this is the FE type of stuff, the FE programming of what I mean is if you're looking at the masses, that extroverted feeling thing also will have its say with regards to outcomes that you see and patterns that you see. Okay. And it's a big thing with social animals that a lot of people did believe that if they did these things, because for them, belief has to do with, that how could the boss give me 28 when it's like, to them it doesn't make sense. You're like, oh my God, it shatters the reality, right? And it's like, the boss,
Mm.
the boss gives you what you accepted. That's what happened. What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you believe? So that extroverted feeling thing is really deep in some people. They take it as morality. They take it as some kind of a otherwise I can't trust people type stuff, that people are just out there, sacrificing themselves for you, being altruistic. Yes, it does have the commie vibe, if I may repeat.
All right, let's keep going. We're going to try to get to halfway through. We got
Okay.
about another minute before we're halfway through.
A lot of folks are depressed, and I get it. I've been in and out of depression as we see the way things are changing so rapidly. But the more that I think about it and the more that I look at it, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a positive thing. What it's doing is it's just shining a light on all of the systems that have been broken, all of the promises that were being made, all of the facades are all starting to break down, and we're starting to realize, wait a minute, how is it that we can pay tremendous amount of taxes, in my opinion, when you combine state and federal and sales and all that, and if that's not enough, the money that you paid taxes on, when you go to the gas pump, you get taxed again. It would be some of the best legislation that we could see come out of Washington would be something like they have on food, where when we buy food, they have to show us what the ingredients are, what's inside, so that we know, right? Well, it'd be really nice to see that everything that you bought, how much of that money was being siphoned out of your, what percentage of it is going to taxes. Because it wouldn't surprise me when everything is said and done, after you pay your state and federal taxes and then taxes at the gas pump and taxes here and additions and fees and park fees and all that, wouldn't be surprised that if you're keeping less than half of your money. And when you start to realize that, and that everything starts getting more expensive, and $6 and $7 gas, the younger people, they're not into it. They don't, there's no point. So maybe it's by decision, maybe it's by circumstances.
So this is as far as we're going to get today, as far as
Yeah.
the video
Okay.
goes. But one thing that he was saying that I think relates directly to a common topic in these sort of red pill spaces, in the men's spaces, manosphere, black manosphere spaces, is this idea that young men are choosing their video game console over relationships. They're choosing video games console plus P Hub over an actual relationship. An actual relationship is expensive, right? An actual relationship, obviously you've got the financial components. You have the low sort of chance of actually even success in the relationship. And is this person even going to stick around? And then you have to go through the same process over and over. So there doesn't seem to be a return on investment that there used to seem to be. And then on top of that, if this even does work out, am I even in a position financially to be able to do the sorts of things for a spouse, for someone that I'm supposed to take care of, that my parents were able to do, that my dad was able to do for his family, that his dad was able to do for his family, right? And that's going to, you want to talk about stuff getting worse in a matter of a generation. If this continues, things will be so much worse than they are right now. Give it 20 years, give it 25 years. It will be so much worse for that next group of folks, because now you're starting to have people pull out, from they're like, look, this is not working. I'm tapping out. And I'm not tapping out after I got divorced because it didn't work out the first time and then I'm tapping out. No, I'm tapping out even before I try. This is a pre tap out. you know. So um I think he brings up some interesting points um from a sort of tree hugger sort of perspective. I'm tripping. But he brings up some really good points uh in how things have changed so much. Now it takes two incomes to do stuff. Now it takes like four, five, six incomes because the two people, they've got full time jobs plus they both have side hustles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there doesn't seem to be there's not much of an incentive for men to play this game because a man can live really cheaply because a man doesn't need much. It's it's getting linked up with the woman that creates all of this additional expense. And if there's not really a way to be able to afford those things that like there was in the past. What do you think of this sort of line of thought here?
No, I mean, I think, well, what do I think? I think that it is downstream from what we mentioned earlier, which are tectonic shifts happening in the economic landscape that can be clearly seen from the data, upon which there are many interpretations that could be given. The demographic picture, in terms of the baby boom and then the declining population, which will be furthered also by the fact that people are choosing to have less and less kids, is one, an economic question of the inability for family formation because of the again, this demographic slow moving train, and also which is a reinforcing kind of as you had mentioned, like it's a vicious circle. And also there's a particular stage of societies that gets to Western democratic, a kind of a mixture of in, certain needs met slash arrangement of society leads to people actually having less and less children. The simplest way to put it is basically that it's and at the end of the day economic. People say it's when you educate women that they don't, it's like don't have kids. It's like, no, what are they using education for? It's about the economic opportunities that it opens up, quote unquote, or possibly even, or if actually in real time does open up those economic opportunities, and people are going to choose, or let's just say the experiment, the way it has run, people chose, or women tend to choose, I'll take the I'll move to quality over quantity. I'll just have one kid and then I want to be able to have extra income and go to France or something like that. It is
Yeah,
indeed, whether you put that particular narrative on it or not, this is how they choose when the societies get to a particular stage, right? So it's like a double whammy going on with all that and the demographic picture. But the economic aspect is a huge part of everything that obviously our friend here has been saying, right? The economic aspect for the family formation and also for the sense of meaning too, which Mr. Hammenegger has, it's got very direct line between his job, his ability to have a family, and his sense of meaning, and being and all that. So all that is being affected. The meaning crisis, blah blah blah, basement Cheeto eating. Obviously, it's all part of the same stew, of which there is a general economic undertone that has to do with too much freaking financial liquidity and this hyperinflationary promise to grow, but not delivering on the growth question. But
yeah,
I guess
yeah.
those are good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that so. What's interesting in this conversation, as we're in Holy Week in the West, like I said, in the East, Holy Week is next week, and you said it's also Ramadan. So in a time where um, religion is teaching us to go with less, to deprive yourself of things that you normally are scarfing down without thinking about it. So when religion is doing that, these traditional religions seem to understand that matter is finite, that the economy, even at one level, is finite. You cannot grow your way out of every issue. At some point, you're going to cap it out. And so, learning how to live with less, how to minimize even your expectations, rather than these totally ridiculous, totally over the top expectations of what life is supposed to be. And then when you don't get it, now you need more medication for your anxiety, your depression, your your inability to sleep, your insomnia. You need more. You can't just drug your way out of issues that are at the core of the human. You can't just keep putting stuff on top of it. And I did a stream a couple weeks ago, one of my car thunders, and I was talking about the Idiocracy movie. And folks that haven't seen that, I think it's a 2006 movie. If you have not seen Idiocracy, I highly encourage folks to watch that movie. That movie, it's a satire. It's hilarious. There's a lot of out loud laughing, belly laughing in that movie. I guarantee it. But it's also really sad because it is painfully accurate. It is painfully accurate. Just really quickly, the plot of the movie is a basically ham and egger military guy gets a job in a library because in a military storage facility where he doesn't have to interact with people. Okay, sound familiar? Okay, where he doesn't have to interact with that many people. And he gets laid off from that position, and they tell him, look, there is this possibility you can go over here. It's an experiment. Get in this time capsule. They wake you up in a year. They're going to give you cash money. Okay? Meanwhile, this prostitute, played by Maya Rudolph, she is trying to escape from her pimp. So, and she sees a payday. And so she's like, okay, I'll do it also. But what happens during that year of time is something happens to the facility. And so what's supposed to be 1 year ends up being, 500 years, whatever it is. It ends up being a long time. Meanwhile, what's happening is this usual thing where as people get more educated, they tend to have less kids. Okay? So now you have, everybody's got these great careers, but now you age out of when it's going to be healthy to have kids for the women. And so now they're doing IVF, they're doing all this stuff trying to have kids. And then, of course, they either can't have kids at all or they're having very few kids. But meanwhile, all of the trailer trash are going wild and hog wild. They're going hog wild and populating the earth with all of these low IQ folk, to the point where society has become totally dumbed down and totally ridiculous. We're seeing this in real life. This trend, we are seeing this in real life. Now, yeah, so I suggest folks check that out. It's kind of it's a sad state of affairs. I think there are some things that potentially could happen that could slow down the this sort of process, but I think this is a done deal. And one thing that I think is interesting too is especially these sort of the Christians that are hoping against hope that stuff is going to get better. Apocalypse is actually in the Bible, right? That stuff is supposed to actually get worse and spiral down and continue to get worse. So don't act surprised when the stuff actually continues to get worse. I'm just saying, that's all I'm saying. I don't mean to be doom and gloom or anything. I don't think that the end is tomorrow or something. But a lot of these things that we see and these developments that we see, I mean, you shouldn't really be surprised that the stuff is going this way. But the economy is not, growing the economy is not going to be the way to fix all these issues. You have to fix something in the heart of man. You have to fix something in the heart of man in order to fix these issues. And I think it's a done deal. I think once Adam ate the apple and then refused to take responsibility, for his role, I think it was done.
It's over right before it started.
Yes.
And so that particular disaster forecast brought to you by Dr. Thunder Financial Advisors. He says also buy Bitcoin. He says Bitcoin is going to the moon to $1 million in 90 days.
Buy gold. Buy gold. Here, I've got a coupon code that you need to buy gold and silver.
Gold coins, backpack, you can stash it in your jackets, move around, become a prepper. Anyways, yeah, so I guess we'll continue next week on my channel. This was a good one, I think, regarding the idea of work and what people are coming to realize about work. Perhaps maybe too late and perhaps never, as you said.
All right. Well, that's our time. Thanks for coming through. Please consider supporting the stream. You can do so on the way out. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Super chats enabled. Super thanks for the replay gang. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Dr. Thunder Music, all one word. Spell out the word doctor. And come back tomorrow morning. I'll have another Car Thunder on a introspective, thought-provoking, topical, kind of stream. And also Tenor Talks will happen tomorrow, and in the evening, probably around 10:30, will be Two Dads React, and we're going to be talking about you want to talk about doom and gloom. we've been on sort of like a the economic collapse. What's up with all of these train derailments, pollution of the poisoning of the water, 50,000 animals dying, a bunch of chickens offed and all like that. We've been on all of that.
What plague are we on? We had the blood water yet?
Right. Those, we still haven't discovered who the whore of Babylon actually is yet. But other than that, we're doing pretty good. So it's I don't know why I'm laughing, right? Because this is pretty, actually, it's super dark and terrifying, but somehow I'm laughing. So anyhow, So it's going to be good. I'll see y'all later. Please be good to yourself and to others. And that is our time. Peace.